Okay, so here we are. So today I mixed things up. We actually should have done this earlier, but well, I got ahead of myself. But today I want to talk about the icon of the triumph of Orthodoxy, and I will show you what that looks like right now. Here we are. Okay, this is the icon of the triumph of Orthodoxy. In this icon, there are a number of different people. There's also a very large icon in the center. There are two beings holding it up. We'll talk about them in a second. And we'll talk about a great number of those different things that we see in that icon there as we go. Okay, so I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of take a look at it for a second. A couple of things to identify here. Let's see. Obviously, I pointed out the icon here. And when I do move my mouse, you can see that, right? I can't remember if that's true or not, but I'm assuming that it is. If you need me to draw or anything like that, please don't hesitate to tell me. Okay, here's the one being that's holding it up. You can see right here, it's an angel. It's another angel on this side. So the angels are holding the icon up. We have people with these hats on. We have these people here. They're important to the story. We have people who look like hierarchs, people who look like monks, more people over here. In each one, a couple of icons are being held. And we, of course, have the main icon in the center. Okay, so we'll talk about all of this in due course. Right, so does anybody want to tell me what the triumph of Orthodoxy is? Okay, well, I'll tell you. The triumph of Orthodoxy is the first Sunday in our season of Lent. Okay, so we've gone through all the preparations. We've actually had Forgiveness Sunday, and then that Monday actually initiates the start of Lent. And Sunday of Orthodoxy is the 7th day after the start of the Lenten season. Okay, so the Sunday of Orthodoxy is meant to give us a celebration of the triumph, if you will, of the use of icons in our church service. Okay, and so I want to talk a lot about that today because it's a pretty important topic for us. And also, I think it would give us the opportunity to explain why icons are still very much a part of our tradition as opposed to some others. And, what it is about icons, what gives us the justification for using icons and things like that. Because in a lot of churches, even today, they don't use icons, and some expressions, if you will, of Christianity question the use of icons because of their understanding of the Old Testament prohibition against graven images. Okay, so we'll talk about that too. All right, but largely, this is a result of the 7th Ecumenical Council. Now, again, ecumenical councils are large councils that are held by pretty much every bishop within the Orthodox Church. At least that's the way it was. We have not had one of these since the year 787, which actually is the 7th Ecumenical Council. And that Ecumenical Council basically concludes, at least within the Orthodox Church, the different ecumenical sessions because, well, at this point we can't have one because there's no emperor present. We can try to have synods, but we don't have any opportunity at this point for an ecumenical council. The reason being that one of the rules mandating how an ecumenical council can be created is if the emperor calls it, and there is no emperor at present within the Orthodox world. Okay, and there certainly isn't an emperor that the United States would recognize, right? I mean, there's Queen Elizabeth at this point, but she's not Orthodox, and so there's really no Orthodox representation of that at this point. So what we have is the Patriarch of Constantinople, which we call Constantinople, as the song goes. Turkey would call it Istanbul. And, there is no emperor in Istanbul to help convene these sessions. So the problem with the issue of iconoclasm, okay, is that let's back up a little bit. So in the religion of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Old Testament, you have that prohibition. It's the, I think, second commandment from the 10 commandments. It is further emphasized in the book of Deuteronomy, and the statement is, there shall be no graven image. You shall worship no graven image. And the classic example of this would be when we have Moses on Mount Sinai, and the people create an idol out of their gold. They make a golden calf, and then they worship the golden calf. And then Moses comes off the hill. He sees them worshiping this. He throws the tablets. He destroys the tablets. They break. And so actually he has to go back up onto the mountain and get a new set, which he does later on in the book of Genesis. But he's so furious that half the people who worship the idol are destroyed, at least half. Everybody is roundly chastised by God. And, a large part of that is because indeed it is a graven image. It's a false image and completely inappropriate for worship. So that prohibition started to carry through. Remember also, by the time you get to the year 787, you also have a very large Muslim influence in the region. They basically, by the time we get to the Seventh Ecumenical Council, pretty much the entirety of the Western Mediterranean shore and the Southern Mediterranean shore are under Islamic control. And they also have a very strong prohibition over the use of images and in idol worship. So in their expression of faith, they use calligraphy, very fancy handwriting, as opposed to images. That's why if you read the news these days and somebody decides unwisely or wisely, I'll leave that up to your judgment, but he or she draws a political cartoon with the face of Muhammad in it. And immediately that's seen in the Muslim world, and they declare fatwa, or a condemnation against the image, and look for ways to punish the person who did it. We also remember we had that whole issue in France where they killed a whole bunch of people who were responsible for allowing the image of Muhammad to be put in their newspaper. That happened, I don't know, years ago, 6-7 years ago by now, I think. And so, we still have that in the expressions of these different religions. And in Christianity, some of the more reformed types of Christianity also see the use of images as illicit. There's one particular founder by the name of Heinrich Zwingli, I think is his name. Anyway, he believed that you should strip all images, including crosses and everything else, out of the churches. The walls should be completely blank and white. There should be no instruments used in worship, only the voice, because the voice is the instrument that God gave us to sing praises to God. He actually took axes to massive pipe organs. I mean, some of the pipe organs he destroyed were, national treasures. And the same with some of the other things, the statuary and the crosses and things like that he destroyed, because he believed that there are to be no images of God, no conceptual images of God at all, and that it's up to us to police that. And so he would go into these different churches in Switzerland, and destroy their religious articles. I wouldn't want to be with him. So by the time you get to the Seventh Ecumenical Council, some of that stuff has started to creep into the Christian expression even before the split in 1054. So we're talking 787. That's about 100 years, a little less than 100 years. Not 100, 7 to 1054. It's a little less than 300 years from when the churches in Rome and Constantinople split. But it's a time when the emperor at the time, and we'll talk about him here in a second, the emperor at the time disallowed the use of icons within the churches, and it actually caused outbreaks of violence. So people were being hurt, killed even, over this particular controversy. They'd go into the churches with axes. If anyone dared to stand in their way, they were slaughtered, and they would get rid of everything that was considered an image at the time. So the Iconoclastic Emperor is an emperor by the name of Theophilus, and he is the one who said, more like the Muslims and more like those of the Jewish persuasion, that that the use of icons in worship is completely forbidden. And so until his death, he maintained that the use of icons or any other images in worship were completely inappropriate. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions about anything so far? Okay, so Theophilus had a son by the name of Michael III, and he had a regent for a mother named Theodora. And Theodora, with the help, of Patriarch Zodius, convened the Synod of Constantinople in 842 to try to end the Iconoclastic War. It didn't really work, because it took from 1842 to wait a minute. Okay, no, I'm wrong. I need to back up. So the Second Council of Nicaea was held in 787. Okay, and that's what declared iconoclasm a heresy. Iconoclasm would be that which forbids the use of icons. There's another group called the Iconodules. The Iconodules allow the use of icons in worship, but the decision of 787 did not finally resolve this split. The resolve came in 842, some 100 years later, maybe 50 years later, 50, 60 years later, somewhere in there. That's when the emperor declared that the use of icons was allowed, and that would have been Michael III through his mother, the regent Theodora. So let me read what the conclusion of the Seventh Ecumenical Council states, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, so we define that the holy icons, whether in color, mosaic, or some other material, should be exhibited in the holy churches of God on sacred vessels and liturgical vestments, on the walls, furnishings, and houses, along with roads, namely the icons of our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, that of Our Lady Theotokos, those of the venerable angels, excuse me one second, and those of all saintly people. Whenever these representatives are contemplated, they will cause those who look at them to commemorate and love their prototype. We also define that they should be kissed and that they are the object of veneration and honor, but not of real worship. That's a very important point, which is reserved for him who is the subject of our faith and proper for the divine nature. The veneration according to an icon is in effect transmitted to the prototype. You venerate the icon, venerated in it the reality for which it stands. Okay, so that's the paragraph that states what has been done as a result of the decision of the Second Council of Nicaea. That's the Seventh Ecumenical Council. Okay, now again, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt and let me know. All right, I see we lost Sam, but we got Steve. Hi, Steve. How you doing? Welcome.
It's good,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay, so if you look at the top of the icon, it says, I'm not going to read this in Greek, well, I can try. The anastelosis tin ikonon, the restoration, I think is a good word for that, of the holy icons. Okay, so remember, there was a time, that's the whole point of the iconoclastic, there was a time when icons were forbidden, and if you had them, you were sorely punished. But so when you have the bringing back of the icons under the young Michael III, you have a celebration of these icons, and that's why you have the people gathered in this particular thing. Okay, so let's take a look at who we have here. If you look here in the top left, right here, this is Saint Theodosia. Next to her is the Venerable Iconios. No, sorry, try Yanukos. The next is Theodore the Student. And then Theodore Graptus over here. And then on the other side, Stephen the New. We actually commemorated Stephen the New in the church a little while ago. Okay, so these are major figures in the use of icons in the world. Okay, let's take a look at maybe one of their lives here. Hold on one second. So the first one, Theodosia, was a virgin martyr. She lived during the 8th century, and she was born as an answer to the fervent prayers of her parents, just like Anna. We've talked about Anna as in Constantine, or no, sorry, not Constantine, Joachim and Anna. And then also Hannah from the Old Testament, the mother of Samuel, the prophet. So after the death of Theodosia's parents, she lived in a women's monastery in Constantinople. She became a nun after she distributed to the poor what remained of her personal inheritance. She's part of that much commission gold and silver icons of the Savior Theotokos and Saint Anastasia. Okay, so when Leo ascended the throne in Constantinople as emperor, Leo the Isaurian, he issued an edict to destroy all holy icons. Above the bronze gate at Constantinople, there was a bronze icon of the Savior, which had been there for more than 400 years. In 730, the Patriarch Anastasius ordered that icon be removed. The Virgin Martyr Theodosia and other women rushed to protect the icon and toppled the ladder with the soldier who was carrying it out of the command. Then they stoned the impious Patriarch Anastasius, and the Emperor Leo ordered soldiers to behead the women. Saint Theodosius, an ardent defendant of icons, was locked up in prison, and they gave her 100 lashes each day. On the 8th day, they led her about the city, fiercely beating her along the way. One of the soldiers stabbed the nun in the throat with a ram's horn, and she received her crown of martyrdom. Okay, so all right, so yeah, then the body of the Holy Virgin was reverently buried with Christians in the monastery of Saint Euphemia in Constantinople, near the place called, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, and the tomb of Theodosius was glorified by numberless healings of the sick. Right, so this is Theodosia right here. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The next one is the Venerable Yanukos. which is a derivative of John. That's not helpful. 1 second. Yes. Okay, so Yanukos was a god-bearing father, an ascetic who lived in the 8th and 9th centuries, a miracle worker both during his life and after his repose. Originally, he was a supporter of iconoclasm, but he came to realize that the icons themselves were not the objects of worship, and so he repented. Okay. And he became an ardent iconodule, which means in favor of the icon. He was a close friend of Zodius of Constantinople, the Patriarch, and he reposed, having lived 94 years in the year 846. But he is another one, you can see him here, and he is another one of the supporters of that only after he realizes more or less the errors of his ways. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Right now, I'm just sort of reading stuff. Okay, the next is Theodore the Student or Studite. Okay, so Saint Theodore is another great supporter. And one thing to point out about all of these, you see all these people around the icon, but they don't all represent the same time period. That is one of the things that icons can do that we can't in photographs or in the things that we depict. You can gather people from all sorts of times, and we call that a synaxis, that everybody is gathered at one place but in one time, but that does not mean that they actually lived in the same era. It's just a way that the icons represent them. Okay, so St. Theodore was another supporter of the use of icons. And he taught monks at the monasteries that he helped found the significance of Byzantine hymnography and hagiography, copying of manuscripts, and also the preservation of holy icons. Okay. He actually wrote a treatise called On the Holy Icons, written in defense of icons during the second iconoclastic era, which was the year 1814 to the year the year 814 to the year 842. Okay. All right. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so that takes care of Theodosia, Yanukos, and Theodore the Student. That leaves Theodore Graptus and Stephen the New. So Theodore Graptus, let me see if I can get his information up here. So Theodore, also known as the Confessor, also known as the Branded. Maybe that's what Graptus means. But he lived with his brother, Theophanes, from a very young age. They lived in a monastery, the Lavra of St. Sava, to be educated as parish priests. Both brothers became monks, and St. Theodore was ordained to the holy priesthood. And then you have the Iconoclastic Emperor Leo V, the Armenian, who reigned from 813 to 820. He expelled and replaced the pious ruler Michael I in the beginning, Leo concealed his heretical views, but later declared himself an iconoclast. The Patriarch of Jerusalem sent for the brothers of sent Theodora and Theophanes bear with me again, I lost my place. Sent the two brothers to Constantinople because they were still in their homeland to defend the holy icons. Therefore, Theodore refused Leo's arguments, presuming the faultiness of his beliefs. Leo ordered that both the brothers be beaten mercilessly and then sent them into exile, forbidding anyone to help them in any way. That's great.
Are they the ones that are up in the front there?
In our icons, you mean?
Yes.
No, that's the icons of Saint Cosmas and Damian. Cosmas and Damian are unmercenary healers. They're people who heal without expecting any sort of compensation whatsoever. Okay, and they would go around the towns and they would commune people. Excuse me. And they would also apply salves and things like that. They were like doctors, but God worked through them to heal the people that they came into contact with. So these, and actually Cosmas and Damian aren't even, I don't think they're related. I think they're just two missionaries. Any other questions, anybody? Okay. All right, so under subsequent emperors, Michael in 820 to 829, and under Theophilus, 829 to 842, both brothers returned from exile. They're urged to accept iconoclasm, but they endured all the tortures instead. They were sent into exile once more, but later returned. This time they were subjected to fierce torture, and finally their faces were branded with the verses of a poem which mocked the holy confessors. Therefore, that's why the brothers are called the branded. The city prefect asked Saint Theodore to take communion with the iconoclast just once, promising him freedom if he did, but the holy martyr replied, "Your proposal is the same thing as saying, let me cut off your head once, and then you may go wherever you wish." After the torture, the holy brothers were banished to Apama in Bithynia, where Saint Theodore died around the year 840. Saint Theophanes survived until the end of the iconoclastic heresy, and died as the bishop of Nicaea. Okay, so, all right. Any questions? Comments, concerns?
Father Kevin, I have one question.
Sure.
So any icon that's portraying the Sunday of Orthodoxy is going to have the same saints in it. It's going to be, no matter which one, you're always going to see the same saints in there, or are there different icons? It's just interpreted a little differently.
That's a good question. Of course, I think they're all good questions, but this is the icon that I'm describing right now. Let me see if I can pull another icon. Bear with me because my screen is small. Got that. Go back here. Honestly, I think the most important thing is that each person that we see represented in this icon is standing up for the legitimate use of icons in church services. They're not all from the same time period. And so the person who's writing this icon sees those people as influential and helpful in terms of keeping the controversy at bay. So I think that's as far as it goes. When we bring up another icon, which I'm going to do here in a second, hang on, put it on my desktop. One second. There we go. A much smaller icon. It has key figures in it. This is the Empress and the her son, and then we have two saints over here, and then people in the back. And like I said, you can't really see it, but for our purposes, it just shows that there are different saints that are pointed out there. They're all holding icons. Just for some reason, whoever did this icon feels that these are the ones that you should talk about, not the others. So basically what the icon will have in it, Steve, is it will have that icon of Christ in the center with his mother. That will be an icon that we'll talk about here in a second. But the people around the icon, it's subject to change. So I'm going off of what we have in terms of our church. This icon is actually on the back wall of our church. And so I'm sort of using them as the people that I'm talking about because they're part of our collection of icons. Okay, did that answer your question? I'm sort of rambling, but the quick answer is what we see here. All people are supporting the use of icons in worship. Okay, but other icons will show other people depending on what the perspective of the iconographer is. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It helped a lot.
Excellent. Good. All right. So, and you see that each is holding a specific icon, and we haven't talked about those other two on the far side. So let me finish up with that, and then we'll go on to some of the theology and stuff in here. Okay, I just have to find my page. There we go. Okay. Now, on the bottom row, so the two gentlemen that are here are not really described in this icon. Okay. But what we do have are four major figures on the bottom. I think just for 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Theodora, Michael, Zodius, Michael. Okay. So we have 5, right? The two with the interesting hats are not talked about. This is Michael, the young emperor. This is the regent, his mother, whose name is Theodora. Okay. And then you have 3 other figures: Methodius, the Patriarch of Constantinople; Michael, the Bishop of Synada, and Tarsius, the Bishop of Constantinople. Okay, so let's talk about Theodora for a second.
I don't see the icon anymore. Is it up or?
Well, I'll bring it. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'll go back to our original. I just have to find my Zoom. Go. Okay. So this is again the young son, the emperor, the actual emperor, but he's too young. So this is his mother, the regent Theodora. And then there are these three figures here. So those are the ones that we're going to be talking about here in short order. Okay, so the first is Theodora. Nope, can't do that one. So Theophilus, the iconoclast, died in 855. And then Theodora was able to restore the icons after that. So she was an Armenian. That happens a lot in those days. Had two brothers, Bardus and Patronus. Okay, and again, what she did is she helped to undo the harm that was caused by Theophilus, who wanted to destroy all the icons. So even under the iconoclastic controversy, Theodora held on to her icons, which she kept inside her chambers. That kind of reminds me of the Russian stories, how the Russian grandmothers would take their icons and paint pictures of flowers on the backs of them. And then when the KGB or whoever came to inspect the houses, they always had the side with the flowers showing. And then as soon as the KGB left, they would flip them around and have icons in their houses. But in her case, she kept the icons in her cell so that she can continue to venerate them. And then after he died, after Theophilus died, Michael got put into the position of emperor in waiting, really. And Theodora took over and she lifted the ban against the icons. Okay. So let's see what else we got. Okay. Oh. So the regency of Theoktistos and Theodora was abruptly ended in 855 when Theoktistos was murdered by Bardus with the backing of the young Michael III. Both were unhappy with Theoktistos' role in government, but for different reasons. But this blow is aimed at Theodora. Her daughters were sent to a convent, and Theodora was formally deposed as the emperor on 15 March 856, but remained at the palace until 857. And then she went off to the monastery of Gastria. Okay. She was canonized for ending iconoclasm and for restoring the veneration of holy icons. But obviously, she also was involved in a lot of political intrigue, which is kind of the way back in those days. All right, so what else we got? We'll talk about Zodius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who's responsible for convening the council that ultimately eliminated the practice of iconoclasm. See if there's anything interesting else about his life. Well, this is interesting. So there was a war between Constantinople and the Arabs, so-called. And after the Arabs won the battle, this is during the time of Theophilus, he vented his anger against Methodius, saying that God punished him because he had let an icon worshiper come close to him. Methodius objected, saying the Lord was angry with him for the insults upon his holy icons. He gave the saint over to torture, struck him about the face, and through these blows, his jaw was broken. Ugly scars remained on his face, and then Methodius was sent in exile to an island called Antigonus, And he was locked up there with 2 robbers in a deep cave. In this dark presence where the light of day did not penetrate, Zodius languished for 7 years until the death of Emperor Theophilus. Then after his death, he is restored. And then he begins this work to begin the 7th Ecumenical Council. Let's see if there's anything else. That's probably enough for that. And again, like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, next is Michael, the Bishop of Sonata. He was Metropolitan of Sonata from 784 to 815. He was exiled by Emperor Leo V, the Armenian, because of his opposition to iconoclasm, and he passed away 23rd May 826. And basically, not a whole lot is known about him except that he was a bishop for a time, and that he was also exiled by Leo V for being a supporter of icons. So that's why he's in the icon. Right, and then finally,
Who's the little guy?
the little guy is the young Michael III. Okay, so when his father died, that was Theophilus, the iconoclast. When he died, Michael III was put in his place, but he was too young to rule. And so his mother, Theodora, who you see pictured here with the cross in her hand, Theodora then is the one who kind of ruled in Michael's place. There's actually a reference to something similar to that in, I think it's Galatians. We read it all the time whenever we talk about someone who converts into Orthodoxy and becomes a great saint, or someone who has a conversion moment and becomes a great saint. It talks about how when we're young, we have regents who, and that we basically live as slaves, right? And then ultimately we are freed and live and make our own decisions. Pretty sure that's Galatians, but that's a passage that we read. We just read it this week again. I can't remember exactly the specifics of it, but that's the gist of it is that he's just too young to rule, and so they put this person in his place. That's Theodora, and she turns out, I mean, she eliminates the banishment of icons, but it turns out she's also got preferential treatment for her own children, not Michael III, but another one, and that person is killed, murdered, and then she loses all of her control. Michael, I guess at that point, is abandoned by her, certainly doesn't have the same level of attention that his brother received. Okay, that's a little bit of an offside, but just to say that Theodora, despite her sanctity and her halo and everything else, she was just as much a, I was talking about this in the monastery the other day. I appreciate saints more for the fact that they're human, and a lot of times they tend to make the same kind of mistakes that we would, and it's so easy to look at Jesus and say, he's perfect and there's no way that we can be perfect, and as a result, we can imitate him, be imitators of Christ. I think Paul says that in numerous places, but that's really, he's not talking about the totality of Christ. He's talking about his teachings. He's talking about his compassion for others. But like I said the other day, if Jesus wanted to walk across the water and it was stormy and there wasn't a boat, he'd walk across the water. He wanted to raise someone from the dead, he'd raise someone from the dead. We don't have those kinds of powers, at least not that we are aware of. Okay, I mean, God can do whatever he chooses. So if he wants one of us to raise someone from the dead, then we will raise somebody from the dead. But in this case, the saints provide an opportunity for us to see someone who can make a mistake. Like, think of Saint Moses, the Ethiopian, a known murderer, had much to atone for in his life, but he becomes one of those powerful images of monastic asceticism that there is. and because of the depth of his repentance and his ability to leave the horrors of his sinful past behind. And that's what gives us hope. I mean, Jesus is just too perfect. And not to say that we shouldn't do what he says to do. We should, absolutely. But if we're looking for role models, I would suggest the saints more than anyone else. Okay, so, getting back to this whole issue with Michael and Theodora, Theodora flexes her political muscles, gets in trouble for it, suffers, watches the death of her son, witnesses her in exile, and so it's a mixed bag there, isn't it? It's a collection of good and bad. Okay, so that's
this is kind of off the wall, but
that's fine.
He's got an incenser. Why do we incense icons?
Because we're told that's okay.
I mean, there's no. I mean, and
Yeah,
then we turn on an
it's the same reason why we incense.
We turn on and incense us. So what is that? What is the connection there?
Okay, well, we were going to talk about that here in a second. Let me finish the two people, okay, and I'll move faster and deal with that, and then we'll talk about the theology of the icons themselves. So Michael, the bishop of Synada, and then Tarsius, the bishop of Constantinople. And we talked about Michael, that he experienced a lot of torments and tortures himself. And then Saint Tarsius was the ecumenical patriarch from 784 until his death in 806. Again, another one of the Iconoclastic patriarchs, faced a lot of attack and oppression because of his faith in that. He led the church, however, for 22 years. He was very frugal. Was a strict ascetic. Always gave to the impoverished, the widows, and the orphans. But again, he faced a lot of adversity because of his support of icons as well. But he is represented here, again, because he is willing to stand for the icons and not allow them to be disposed of just because of someone's hatred of images. All right, so getting back to Mother's question and some other things having to do with this icon. The first thing is, you look at the icon there, you see the Mother of God. We're talking about the icon inside the icon. So Jesus is sitting on his mother's lap. And for the first time, I think, in what we've done, we see that her vestments are white and red, not blue and red. That's interesting. I wouldn't take much from that, but except that this isn't really an icon of the Mother of God. This is an icon of the triumph of orthodoxy. The understanding is that the painter or the writer of that icon is Saint Luke, the writer of the gospel. We believe he was the first iconographer. And so Saint Luke is that. There are angels supporting the icon to show the divine support for this practice. Okay, but getting back to the question then, what is exactly permissible within the use of icons? What do we do? What's the issue? And I think I read this before, but I'm going to read it again. I can find it. I'm not going to find it easily. Yeah, I'm not going to find it easily. It's here. Okay. So this again is this is what we call the epitome, or the summary, if you will, of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. Okay, so we define the holy icons, whether in color, mosaic, or some other material, should be exhibited in the holy churches of God, on the sacred vessels and liturgical vestments, on the walls, furnishings, and in the houses. Okay, so we've established that. Further on, whenever these representations are contemplated, they will cause those who look at them to commemorate and love their prototype. So they are like windows into heaven, as they describe. We're not worshiping the paint. We're not worshiping the picture. We're worshiping the reality behind that picture and that painting. Okay? Reality behind that is Christ, the Mother of God, saints, so on. Okay, so that's what we are looking at. We're looking at an icon, but we also understand that there is a there's a, how do I describe it? There's a difference between worshiping a picture and worshiping an icon. And there's a difference between worshiping an idol and worshiping an icon. Okay, but let me move on to answer Mother's question. We define also that they should be kissed and that they are an object of veneration and honor, not of real worship, which is reserved for him who is the subject of our faith and is proper the divine nature. Okay, so if we're going to kiss them and we're going to venerate and honor them, then using incense is entirely appropriate as well. Okay, and so what's going on there? Well, think about the sensings that I do. And Mother, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and it would be a great opportunity to do this because, you know, it's good to know these things. So when I sense a lay person, I sense them once. When I sense a bishop, I sense a bishop 3 times. When I come up to the icons, every one of the icons, I sense them 3 times. Now, it gets a little tricky because sometimes, like especially if you go to Antiochian Village and you look at the chapel there, they have a composite icon where Peter and Paul are in that icon, but they're in different places on the icon, meant to indicate a sense of separation, although there is no real separation. So do you sense it once, or do you sense it 3 times? Do you sense it 6 times because you got Peter and Paul? Do you sense it how many times? I don't know. Generally, in that situation, I do sense them each individually. So I sense Peter 3 times. I sense Paul 3 times. I sense Christ 3 times. I sense the Mother of God 3 times. But when I sense a priest twice. Okay. And I have a little running joke with Subdeacon David Wagaman, because sometimes, especially if I've been, because when I'm at the monastery, I also tend to sense mothers twice because they've taken their orders. And so I treat them at the same level that I would treat a priest. And then I sense the sisters once because they haven't taken that higher vow. Am I correct in doing that, Mother?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, that's what I do, and I haven't been corrected yet, so I'm assuming that I'm pretty much on the ball
Well,
there.
I want to share something I was told years ago, and it was way back when I was a catechumen, was that we sense and I don't know if it's true. That's why I was asking. But we sense the icons because of the presence of God within the icons, or the window into the heaven, and that they sense us because we're supposed to have that same presence within us. We're supposed to also, we have his likeness within us. So that's why we're sensed too. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. That the sensing is meant to be not to us, but to God.
Right.
Okay. But, then you get into that messiness. Okay, well, why do you sense priests twice? And why lay people once? And why bishops 3 times? In reality, we sense them more than 3 times. If I do a bishop correctly, I've sensed him 3 times because he blessed the incense. And then I sense him 9 times before I go down the aisle, but after I do the iconostasis. And then when I come back from sensing the rest of the church space, I turn to him again and I sense him 9 more times. So we're talking, 21 times, a 21 sense salute in every Vespers. So that's how I was taught to do it. You sense the bishop 3 times when he blesses the incense. You sense him 9 times at the start, 9 times again after. So total, like I said, of 21. If there are other bishops presiding, the only one who gets sensed that number of times is the presiding bishop. Other bishops would just be sensed 3 times. Now,
glad you're doing it.
What's that?
Glad you're doing it.
Yeah, right? It's hard to keep track. So sensing icons then is appropriate because of what Mother said. We are looking at the divine reality that exists behind the icons, not the icons themselves. Okay? That's really important, I think, for us to remember. But even more important is the second phase of what Mother said, and that is that the image of God does live within each of us. Okay? And So the appropriateness of the sensing, each person gets sensed as a recognition that they are made in God's image, that the Holy Spirit dwells in them because they have been chrismated and had the seal of the Holy Spirit, imprinted upon them, right? So you have that divine part of you that then is worthy of veneration, okay? Living up to that is the challenge of it all, And so if I sense you and you say, oh, well, I'm not worthy. Well, no, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's the divine reality inside you, which is kind of humbling. But here's another thing. A lot of people cross themselves when I sense them. Don't. Yeah, you don't cross yourself when I sense you. Because that's like you're blessing yourself because you got sensed. That doesn't really add up. So, the appropriate thing to do when you're being sensed is you cross your hands over your heart, okay? Like some people do at communion. We're going to talk about that in a second, and then I'll wrap up here in a minute because we're running over. But so you put your hands over your chest like this, and you just bow. When the priest comes by and senses you, you just bow. You don't make the sign of the cross, because the sign of the cross is like what happens if you sneeze or if something bad happens. You make the sign of the cross to ask God to save you and protect you. You're not making the sign of the cross to be protected from the incense.
Are you supposed to make the sign of the cross when you walk past us with the chalice?
You don't have to. Just
I
be
know I
reverent.
always do. I thought we were supposed to.
Yeah,
but-
just be reverent. That's all. It's but even then, when I come past with the chalice and stuff, at that point, nothing's consecrated. Nicholas Cabasilas talks about this in what he wrote, centuries ago. And others have talked about it since. A lot of people like to venerate the chalice and stuff because they've had the body and blood of Christ within them. But at the point when I'm doing the great entrance, there is no, the vessels themselves, even though they're consecrated for this purpose, the things inside them are not consecrated yet. They're not. Well, they're not.
I was always told though that they have held the consecrated gifts though, so there's a reverence to them, but they're not. It's not like having the gifts there.
Right. Yeah, I
Because the
agree with that.
Armenians are real sticklers about that. They like to be blessed on the head with it if they're not receiving communion.
Who
And
are?
It's the Romanians sometimes like to be blessed on the head if they're not receiving communion, because they believe that anyway. And I was also told that when you bless us at the end of church, we don't cross ourselves either because we're not supposed to.
Right. And what Mother has told us when we're at the monastery, and I'm inclined to agree with her, is don't cross yourselves when you're coming, don't walk up when you're receiving the gifts. Don't walk up like this, because you put yourself in a position where you can't help to receive the gifts. When you're communing, she got really, we had a problem actually.
She gets real sticky about that, yeah.
Yeah, well, and justifiably so. We have to be careful with these gifts. So she got really upset when I was serving, that we had a bit of an accident where someone had their hands crossed, and then things got all messed up, and the communion came out of their mouth and landed somewhere, and it ended up not being caught by the napkin. It ended up on the floor. And you know who cleaned it up? Mother Christophora did. And it should have been me, but she did. Which is very humbling and really horrible. I don't ever want to see that again. Okay, so to walk up like this, it's nice to be reverent, okay? But that's not, there's a fine line between piety and reverence, okay? Like over piousness and reverence. So come up in a spirit of humility. Have the hands in front of you if you want to come up that way, but by the time you receive the gifts, get your hands out of the way. Keep them somewhere where they're not going to get in the middle of everything else that's going on, so that you can help the altar servers. And even if you need to bring the napkin to your own chin, that's a great idea. As long as they're ready for you to do that, that's a very good idea. Because that way, if anything does come out of your mouth, there's not going to be a gap between you and the napkin.
Where I've seen people when they cross themselves bump the spoon or bump the napkin. That's usually the big problem. Because they don't realize they're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I realize that this is all part of our expression of our faith, how we express our humility and how we express our you know, just our gratitude to God. But like I said, I mean, there's a fine line. There's a functional aspect to all of this too. And the most important thing is that the body and blood of Christ have to be brought to your mouth and kept safe from any possible accident. So it comes to your mouth, and then the spoon comes back into the chalice, and we're done. And that's ideal, right? But getting let's go back to icons just for a second, though. So the idea with the icons then is that we sense them because we recognize that the things that the icons depict are the holy things. Saint Gregory of Nyssa, Saint Athanasius, you know, Saint John the Forerunner, the prophet and forerunner, and Baptist John, the Mother of God, Christ Himself, the Holy Trinity. All of those point to a reality that exists beyond the wood and the paint. Now, let me get back to a point that runs against, you know, the followers of the Jewish religion and the Muslims, and that is this idea of graven images. We have one thing that they do not. We have an incarnate God, okay? Once Christ becomes incarnate, then we can honestly say that we have seen God face to face, all right? They cannot, because they do not believe that Jesus was God. So they don't have that particular point that they can cross that we do, because we know the reality of God in Christ, okay? So at that point then, physical depictions are legitimate because we've had the ultimate physical depiction of God in the form of Jesus Christ, right? When He comes to earth, He hallows that which is on earth. He sanctifies it, okay? When He goes to the nether regions, into the domain of the dead, He sanctifies that too. He brings light to the dark. And so in all places, wherever there may be life, creation, there is no place now where there is not a presence of God. Okay, so the icons are an echo of that particular reality of God on earth. That means that they are totally legitimate, and that the rule of graven images is over, that no longer holds any particular weight. Now, who said that first? Well, that would be St. John of Damascus, among others. But that's where we get this message from, that when we have the incarnation of Christ, we now have the ability to portray the holy ones in the form of holy icons. Okay? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we can say then, without any kind of qualms, that the use of icons is a completely legitimate thing, because it is the reality of the holiness that exists not in the wood itself, but the reality that the wood points to. It's a reference to those things. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so that's...
So are we living icons?
We better be.
Okay, just checking.
But it's sometimes it's hard to tell, Mother, and that's you know, that's our journey.
I mean, that's what we're supposed to think of, that we're living icons. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
We're called to be living icons.
Everything that's created, let everything that hath breath praise the Lord. You know, but even that, when we think about what we see in Psalm 103, you know, everything that is created, you know, points to the reality of the divinity beyond it. You know, waterfall even does. A glacier does. Whatever. Okay? And again, you have to have the willingness to see that. You know, an atheist will look at it and say, I don't see it. But we're not atheists. And we do. And that's okay. You have to have eyes to see. Jesus says it all the time. Let those who have ears to hear, what's it say? Let those who have ears to hear. I think he says something to that similar thing. Anyway, the idea is you have to be attenuated to it. You have to have your attention on it. And when you do, then it makes sense. And so we don't kiss the icon itself. We don't kiss the wood and the paint. We kiss the spiritual, the divine reality that exists inside and beyond that thing. that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody?
Did you say who the little guys in the funny hats were? Did I miss that?
Oh, the little guys in the funny hats. No, actually, they don't talk about who they are.
Okay.
But we see those in other places. I'm not. Where is the icon that I saw them before?
It's okay. I was just curious. I can research that.
Yeah. My hunch is
for some reason I thought they were the Jewish whatever's, but I'm not sure about that.
I was wondering if that's not John of Damascus or somebody like that,
Yeah.
because it depicts a type of clothing that's alien to Constantinople.
That's true.
Okay, but their gestures are still that he's blessing with that hand.
That's true.
That's an Orthodox gesture. So I'm wondering if that's not somebody from like a foreign land, or maybe from Jerusalem, or maybe under Muslim control, something like that. That was always my impression, but I can look it up and let you know.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? I hope this helped. This is one of the busier icons. You get to look at different people. And so when you look at this icon now, it's representing the triumph of Orthodoxy, the restoration of icons into our worship, because they had been banned and now they're back. You have a whole lot of people there. And all those people that you see are, other than the angels, who are supporting the icon and, of course, endorsing the practice of the use of icons in church. That icon in the center is from St. Luke, the physician and writer of the gospel, the first iconographer. All the people that are evident, there are a whole bunch of halos that you can't see the people underneath them, but the rest of them, that's an interesting point too. We need to talk about that for a second, Mother. But all of the halos then point to the reality of people who either helped to restore the use of icons in the church or suffered as a result of their refusal to get rid of the icons in their church. So that's what the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10 with the halos. What I forgot to point out, Mother, is that those two that are in the interesting garb do not have halos. So I do not know who they are, but they are probably not considered saints of the church. So it might be worth looking.
I don't know. We have to look. I have to ask an iconographer friend of mine about this.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
And then get back to me. Okay. And then, the rest of it, the icons that they're holding, they're just showing that the different types of icons are perfectly legitimate. Christ on the one side, the Bible closed, on the other side, like a virgin saint that's being held in the arms. Let me see if I can remember her name. Of course I can't. Hold on. Nope, wrong thing.
This really doesn't have anything to do with this icon, but I love it when people go, "Oh, it's not a real icon unless it's done with Byzantine style and egg tempera, blah, yada, yada, yada." And then the Lord makes a paper one weep. I just love that.
Right.
I just love that. It's like,
Yeah.
He's alive and well, and
Well,
he's trying to tell us to make sense.
Really amazed me when they brought the icon from Hawaii the first time, because that is a paper icon, but it gushed like something I've never seen before. It's just stunning how that happens. There's no explanation for it. It's just, and it's so fragrant.
Hawaii, by the way, the island that the icon is on, they're inundated with water. They're flooding. They're without power. And then the friends on the other island that we know, Rula and her family, they are also in trouble with floods and water. So
didn't they just get a bunch of snow?
They got tons of snow, and then they got all this flooding water on top of it. So when I talked to Mahara, she said that I said, "Are they okay?" And she said, I said, "Are they okay? Are they building a boat?" And she said, "Well, they're thinking about the boat right now." So because it's so bad, but so prayers for all of those poor people.
Definitely. Thank you, Mother. Yes, we'll keep the people of Hawaii in our prayers. God protect them.
Who would think Hawaii would be? And one of our sister's parents are there on their vacation.
Yeah, more snow
Yeah,
than we're
it's
getting
great- it's
here,
great
that's for
today.
sure. I'm not complaining, but it's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
Okay, well, God bless you. We're let me get back to you on what we're going to do next week. We'll probably do this time. We'll do the Lazarus, but there are a couple of other icons in the general area where we are right now where we could introduce other things. But I think that's a good one, and then we'll talk about. Well, we could talk about John of Climacus. We could do that one. That's an interesting icon.
This is a quiz. Which icon has a helicopter in it?
That is the canonization of Saint Raphael. Well, it does, but what's the one you're thinking of?
St. Herman.
Oh yeah,
Herman of
okay,
Alaska.
that's
He had to
right.
take his relics over in a helicopter. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, that was just for fun.
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah, and we'll take a look. That's a great. If you can get me a decent resolution picture or a picture of the icon, let
That's
me
a
know,
fun
because
icon.
that would be awesome. And we'll
Okay.
talk about that, because that's got his whole life right in the
Right.
frame. Yeah, I love
Well,
those.
there's a lot of icons like that, but yeah, his does. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
fun.
I don't mean to keep you all.
No, it's okay. All right. Well, God bless you all. Okay. Thank you very much for being here tonight. If you have any questions, just feel free to send an email or just leave a note somewhere, and I'll be happy to respond. And if you do have any thoughts about what we're doing and ways to make it more interesting, let me know. We will probably, today's the 8th, right? So next week's the 15th, week after that's 22nd. Yeah, we can do 2 more of these. We'll take a break between Christmas and New Year, but we'll do 2 more classes. So we'll do probably Lazarus next week and then Palm Sunday the week after. Okay?
Good.
All right. God
Thank
bless
you.
you. Talk to you
Okay,
soon.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome. See you later.
St. Herman's on Monday.
Yes, we'll have to remember. Okay, thank you, Mother.